Why do so many people who come from nothing end up right back there, even after hitting it big? Have you ever noticed how some folks suddenly get their hands on serious money selling a piece of property, landing a huge deal, or straight up winning the lottery only to blow through it all and end up broke again in just a few years? One guy sells land for millions. Then a couple of years later, he's scraping together small loans just to get by. Another signs a fat contract. Looks like he's finally made it. But a handful of no big deal decisions later, he's starting over from zero. Some lottery winners walk away with suitcases full of cash, living the dream for a minute, then end up right back punching a clock, working harder than ever. So what the hell happens? The money showed up, plenty of it, but it vanished just as fast, quietly, without a fight. It's not because these people don't value money, and it sure isn't because they're stupid, like some folks love to say from the sidelines. The hard truth is simpler. Most of them never learned how to keep money. They never built the mindset that makes money stick around long term. We all like to think, if I just had the cash, everything would change. But here's the reality check. Money doesn't change your life. Money just amplifies who you already are inside. If you're negative, money magnifies your mistakes. If you're unprepared, it speeds up the leak. If you lack the skills, that windfall turns into pressure instead of freedom. That's why you see so many stories of rich today, broke tomorrow. It's not about not having enough money. It's about still carrying a broke mindset. Old habits stay. Emotional reactions stay. And when your thinking can't keep up with how fast the money arrives, no amount is ever enough. It all slips away. I'm not saying this to judge anybody. I'm saying it because most of us are regular people, and we deserve to stare this truth in the face. If a big opportunity ever lands in your lap, are you actually ready? Not ready to spend it, ready to think about it, decide about it, and keep it. That's exactly what we're diving into today. We're going deep on why people lose money almost as soon as they get it. The common traps that turn good luck into a nightmare. And if you're sitting on a real shot right now, how to avoid the same mistakes and turn that money into a real launch pad instead of a trap. Because real opportunities don't come around twice very often. And when they do, you'd better know how to make them work for you. Here's something that sounds crazy but is absolutely true. When money comes too fast, it can be one of the most dangerous things that ever happens to you. Because if your mindset hasn't caught up, the ending is almost always the same. The money comes, and then it goes. Picture this. You've been driving the same beat-up motorcycle your whole life. Suddenly, somebody hands you the keys to a brand new supercar. You're excited, right? But if you've never learned to drive something that powerful, that car is either gonna sit in the garage looking pretty, or you're gonna wrap it around a tree the first time you take it out. Money is exactly the same. If you're not ready to handle it, it's not a blessing, it's a test. And most people fail it. Money isn't good or evil. It's just a mirror and a magnifying glass. If you've got a solid foundation, it becomes leverage. If you don't, it becomes the hardest lesson you'll ever learn. And no matter how much you get, without the mindset and the skills, you end up right back at square one or worse. Welcome to the channel, where uncomfortable truths are quietly examined. Today we're pulling the curtain back on why sudden wealth destroys so many lives, and exactly what you need to do if it ever happens to you. If this is hitting home already, do me a quick favor, hit that like button so this reaches more people who need to hear it. And if you want to make sure you never miss these straight talk conversations about money and life, subscribe and turn on notifications right now. Trust me, you'll thank yourself later. Let's get into it. Listen, Let's cut straight to the chase here. Money doesn't change you. It just turns up the volume on who you already are. That's the hard reality behind sudden wealth. When a big windfall hits, whether it's a lottery jackpot, a fat signing bonus, or selling a business overnight, it acts like a magnifier. If you've got solid habits, discipline, and a clear head, that money becomes serious leverage. It opens doors, builds security, and lets you create real freedom. But if there are cracks inside old insecurities, emotional spending triggers, or just plain lack of know-how, that same money exposes them fast, and it amplifies them until everything comes crashing down. Psychologists even have a name for this: sudden wealth syndrome. It's the stress, guilt, isolation, and paranoia that hit when wealth arrives too quickly for your mindset to handle. You feel like an imposter. You worry everyone's out to get a piece. And way too often you start self-sabotaging because deep down, you don't feel ready. Take Jack Whittaker. Back in 2002, he won the biggest undivided lottery jackpot in U.S. history, $315 million Powerball. He was already a successful contractor, not broke by any means. But after the win, robberies, lawsuits, family tragedies, including losing his granddaughter to drugs, and eventually, he said outright that he wished he'd torn up the ticket. The money didn't create those problems. It just poured gasoline on what was already simmering, and he's far from alone. You've heard the stats tossed around that up to 70% of lottery winners go broke. The truth is a bit nuanced, but the numbers are still brutal. Reliable studies show lottery winners are significantly more likely to file bankruptcy within a few years than average folks. And in pro sports, about 16% of NFL players end up bankrupt within 12 years of retirement, even after earning millions. The pattern's the same. Money arrives fast. Old habits kick in harder, and poof, it's gone. Here's the small lesson I want you to grab right now. Sudden wealth isn't a gift or a curse on its own. It's a test. It reveals whether you've got the foundation to handle it, or whether it'll handle you. If you're listening to this and thinking about your own shot someday, start building that foundation today, because the real stories of disaster almost always start with the same blind spot, believing the money will fix everything inside. But next up, we're going to look at some of the most infamous American lottery disasters' real names. Real millions lost and why they happened. You won't want to miss these. Let's keep going. All right, let's talk about what people call the lottery curse here in America. It's that pattern where someone hits a massive Powerball or Mega Millions jackpot millions, sometimes hundreds of millions, and instead of living happily ever after, their life falls apart. They end up broke, addicted, divorced, or worse. And it's not just bad luck. It's what happens when a ton of money lands in the lap of someone who isn't wired to handle it. The numbers are ugly. Studies from places like the Certified Financial Planner Board show that nearly 1/3 of lottery winners end up bankrupt, way higher than the average American. And many do it within 3 to 5 years. Some older quotes throw around 70%. But even the more conservative figures are a wake-up call. These aren't rare flukes. They're predictable when old habits meet unlimited cash. Let's look at a few iconic American stories that prove the point. First, Jack Whittaker. Back in late 2002, he won the largest single-ticket jackpot at the time, $315 million Powerball. He took the lump sum, about $113 million after taxes. Jack was already a successful contractor, not hurting for money. He gave millions to churches and charities. But then the wheels came off. Thieves stole hundreds of thousands in cash from his car. Lawsuits piled up. His granddaughter and daughter both died from drug overdoses tied to the family chaos. He got divorced, By 2007, he was telling reporters he wished he'd torn up the ticket. He called the win the worst thing that ever happened to him. Jack passed away a few years ago, but his story still stands as the classic example of how money can amplify tragedy. Then there's Evelyn Adams. She did something statistically insane, won the New Jersey lottery twice, in 1985 and 1986. Total take $5.4 million. That's like getting struck by lightning, twice. But Evelyn gambled most of it away in Atlantic City, handed out huge chunks to family, and made bad investments. By the early 1990s, she was living in a trailer park, broke. She later said the wins ruined her life because everyone wanted a piece. Another gut punch story, William Bud Post. He won $16.2 million in Pennsylvania back in 1988. Sounds life-changing, right? Within a year, family pressures, bad business deals, and spending spiraled him into debt. He ended up convicted on assault charges, bankrupt, and died broke in 2006. He once said, "Everybody dreams of winning money, but nobody realizes the nightmares that come out of the woodwork." And David Lee Edwards, unemployed when he split a $280 million Powerball in 2001. He blew it on mansions, cars, private jets, and drugs. 5 years later, evicted, addicted, living in a storage unit. He died penniless in a hospice at 58. These aren't cherry-picked outliers. They're the poster children for why the curse feels real. Here's the small lesson to take away right now. The curse isn't supernatural, it's human. It's what happens when excitement overrides planning, when generosity turns into people-pleasing, and when nobody hits the pause button to build a real system. If you're ever holding a winning ticket, the first move isn't celebrating, it's protecting yourself from yourself. But these lottery stories are just one slice. Next, we're going to look at another group that gets massive windfalls. Professional athletes and entertainers, the ones who sign 8-figure contracts in their 20s and still end up broke. You think lottery winners have it rough? Wait till you hear these numbers. Let's roll on. All right, if lottery winners have it bad, wait until you hear about professional athletes and entertainers. These are folks who earn millions not from one lucky ticket, but from multi-year contracts, endorsements, the works. Yet the bankruptcy rates are even more shocking. A solid study from the National Bureau of Economic Research found that about 16% of NFL players file for bankruptcy within 12 years of retirement. That's 1 in 6 guys who made millions on the field, ending up in court. For NBA players, older reports pegged it at around 60% going broke within 5 years. Though leagues push back on the exact number, but nobody denies it's a massive problem. Careers are short. Average NFL stint is about 3 years, NBA around 4 to 5, and the money spikes huge, then drops off a cliff. No time to learn how to handle it. Let's hit a couple of classic examples. Antoine Walker. This guy earned over $108 million in NBA salary alone during his career championship with the Celtics. All-star multiple times, but by 2010 he filed for bankruptcy. What happened? Lavish spending. Supporting a huge entourage, he admitted to flying 50, 60 people around. Bad real estate flips during the housing crash and gambling debts. Walker later said he was living like the money would never stop. Another one. Vince Young. Quarterback, Heisman runner-up, drafted high, made around $35 million in guarantees and salary. But poor advice, propping up family and friends, flashy purchases. He filed bankruptcy in 2014 while still young. Or Warren Sapp, Hall of Fame defensive tackle, earned over $80 million. Child support for multiple kids, bad investments, lost homes to foreclosure, bankrupt in 2012. And don't get me started on boxers or entertainers. Mike Tyson blew hundreds of millions on tigers, mansions, and parties before going bankrupt in 2003. The common thread? Short careers mean the income window slams shut fast. Young age, no real-world money experience. Pressure to look the part, cars, jewelry, helping everyone back home, bad advisors or straight-up scams. And that same competitive, risk-taking mindset that wins games. It leads to dumb investments or gambling everything away. Here's the small lesson to lock in today. Talent gets you the money, but discipline keeps it. Athletes prove that earning big doesn't automatically teach you how to manage big. If you're grinding toward your own big break, start practicing money habits now while the stakes are small. Because these stories show the fall hits hardest when you're not ready. But lottery winners and pros are both sudden in a way. Next, we're flipping the script. We're going to compare that to people who build wealth slowly, the ones whose money actually sticks around, and why that slow grind often beats the fast windfall every time. You ready for the contrast? Let's dive in. All right. Let's flip the script now and talk about the real difference maker. Earned wealth versus sudden wealth. Why does money that you grind for, dollar by dollar, tend to stick around? While the big windfalls we just talked about often vanish like smoke, it's not luck. It's because earned wealth forces you to build the habits, knowledge, and discipline that keep money in your pocket. Sudden wealth skips all that schooling. You get the cash before you've learned the rules. People who build wealth slowly through years of working, saving, and investing small amounts develop a deep respect for every dollar. They learn to spot good opportunities from bad ones. They get comfortable delaying gratification. They understand risk because they've felt the pain of losing small amounts along the way. Sudden wealth? It hits like a tsunami. No time to prepare. Old habits rush in, amplified, and the money floods out just as fast. Look at the contrast in real lives. On the sudden side, we've got the lottery and athlete stories bankruptcy rates hitting around 1/3 for big lottery winners in some studies, and about 16% for NFL players within 12 years of retirement, according to solid research from places like the National Bureau of Economic Research. Those are way higher than the average American. Now flip to earned wealth. Warren Buffett started delivering papers as a kid, buying his first stock at 11. Built Berkshire Hathaway over the decades through patient, disciplined investing. Today, one of the richest people on earth, still living in the same modest house he bought back in the 1950s. Or Oprah Winfrey, grew up in poverty, worked her way up in media, turning talent and grit into a billion-dollar empire. She didn't blow it, she invested in herself, her brand, and smart ventures. Still thriving. Even someone like Howard Schultz at Starbucks, who came from a poor family, built the company step by step. No overnight jackpot, just consistent execution. These folks didn't get a windfall. They earned it through trial, error, and compounding over time. That's why it lasts. Here's the small lesson to nail down right now. The path to wealth isn't about how fast the money arrives. It's about whether you've paid the tuition and experience to handle it. Earn it slowly and you're wiring yourself for long-term success. Get it suddenly without the foundation? You're playing defense from day one. If you're building your money the hard way right now, keep going. That's the advantage. But knowing the difference is one thing. The real destruction often starts with those quiet emotional traps that sneak up when the money hits. Next, we're diving into the first big one. That rush of impulse spending and the high of thinking, I finally made it. It's more common and more dangerous than you think. Stay with me. All right, let's talk about the first big emotional trap that hits almost everyone with sudden money. Impulse spending and that euphoric high of, "I finally made it." When the windfall lands, whether it's a lottery check, a signing bonus, or cash from selling something big, your brain lights up like it's Christmas morning on steroids. Years of scraping by, saying no to stuff, feeling behind, all that flips overnight. Suddenly, you feel like you deserve to enjoy it right now. No waiting, and that's when the damage starts. You buy the dream car, the massive house, the jewelry, the trips because, why not? I earned this break. But impulse spending isn't just buying stuff. It's deciding with your emotions instead of your plan, and it drains the money faster than anything else. Look at David Lee Edwards. He hit part of a $280 million Powerball jackpot back in 2001. Unemployed at the time, within months, a $1.5 million mansion, luxury cars, a private jet, jewelry worth millions. He blew through it all in under 5 years, adding drugs and bad choices, and ended up evicted, addicted, living in a storage unit, died broke at 58, or Billy Bob Harrell Jr. won $31 million in Texas Lotto in the late 90s. Started with a huge ranch, cars for the family and cash gifts everywhere. The high felt amazing at first, but the spending never stopped. Within 2 years, divorced, in debt, and tragically took his own life. These aren't weak people. It's the rush, the dopamine hit of finally saying yes to everything you've wanted. Athletes fall into it too. That first big contract paycheck leads to fleets of cars and bling before they've even played a full season. The small lesson here is simple but brutal. That finally made it feeling is a lie. It tells you the money is endless, and you deserve to blow it now. But real freedom comes from pausing that long enough to build something lasting. Hit pause on the big buys for at least a few months. Feel the urge, but don't feed it yet. Because this trap is sneaky and it's usually the gateway to the next one. We're talking lifestyle creep, quietly upgrading everything to match your new status, until you're spending more than ever just to feel normal. It's even more insidious. Hang with me, we're getting there next. All right, let's hit the second big emotional trap head on. Lifestyle creep, and that burning need to prove you're successful. This one's sneaky because it doesn't feel like a trap at first. It feels like a reward. You get the windfall, and suddenly your normal starts shifting upward. The apartment isn't big enough anymore. The car doesn't match the new you. Vacations go from road trips to private jets. Dinners out become the default. And before you know it, you're spending way more every month just to maintain what now feels like baseline living. It's called creep for a reason. It happens gradually. You upgrade one thing, then another to match, and soon your expenses have ballooned to eat up all the new money. And then some. The drive behind it? Proving something. To family back home. To friends. To social media. To yourself. I made it, so I should look like I made it. But that proof comes at a brutal cost. Take Antoine Walker, NBA champion, all-star, earned over $108 million in his career. He admitted he got caught up trying to live like the hip-hop icons of the era, Jay-Z. Puff Daddy, the flashy cars, the jewelry, the entourage. He bought multiple luxury homes, fleets of high-end rides, and custom everything. Supported dozens of people flying with him. By 2010, just a couple of years after retiring, he filed for bankruptcy, had to sell his championship ring. Walker later said the lavish lifestyle he built became impossible to sustain once the paychecks stopped. Or look at Mike Tyson, boxing legend, peaked at hundreds of millions. Mansions, exotic pets like tigers, endless parties, and gold everything. He blew it all chasing that image of ultimate success. Bankrupt in 2003. These guys didn't wake up planning to go broke. They just kept upgrading to match their status until the status ate the fortune. Here's the small lesson that saved a lot of people pain. Success isn't measured by how much you spend to look successful. It's measured by how much freedom and security you build. Lock in your old lifestyle for a while after the money hits. Force yourself to live like the before version a bit longer. It buys time to let the high settle and make smarter choices. Because this trap often opens the door to the next killer, turning into the bank of you for everyone around. Family, friends, old acquaintances all suddenly needing help. And saying yes feels good until it doesn't. That's where we're headed next. Are you seeing this in your own circle? Stick around. We're breaking it down. All right, let's get real about the third emotional trap that destroys more windfalls than almost anything else. Turning into the bank of you for family, friends, and everyone who suddenly remembers your phone number. When the money hits, the requests start pouring in. Loans for businesses, help with bills, down payments on houses, gifts for weddings, kids, emergencies. Long-lost cousins pop up. Old high school buddies hit you up like you're their personal ATM. And it feels impossible to say no because guilt kicks in hard. You've made it out. They haven't. You want to help the people who had your back. But here's the brutal truth. Most of those loans never come back. The expectations never stop. And saying yes once, it guarantees they'll ask again and tell everyone else you're good for it. This drains fortunes faster than flashy cars or bad investments. Look at Antoine Walker again, earned over $108 million in the NBA. He didn't just blow it on himself, he supported a massive entourage, flying dozens of people around, covering their lifestyles. By bankruptcy, he was selling his championship ring to pay debts. Or Warren Sapp, Hall of Famer, has over $80 million in career earnings. Child support, loans to friends, and family obligations piled up. Bankrupt with millions in claims from people he helped. Lottery side, endless stories. One recent anonymous winner gave $2 million each to mom and sister, total $4 million generous up front. But then they demanded more. A family beach house, leaked it to aunts and uncles, who lined up with their hands out. Called her selfish for saying no. Mark Cuban nails it. He tells lottery winners, tell everyone no from day one, because generosity turns into entitlement quickly. Here's the small lesson that's protected a lot of smart winners. Your money is your responsibility first. Helping is great if you plan it, limit it, and make it gifts, not open-ended support. Set boundaries early. Practice saying, I can't right now without explanation. It feels cold at first, but it saves relationships and your future. Because avoiding these emotional traps is key, but it takes real systems to make it stick. Next, we're building that bulletproof setup. Rules, tools, and mindset shields that actually work in the real world. These are the things the winners who keep it do differently. Are you ready to get practical? Let's go there. All right, we've covered the traps, the emotional landmines that blow up most windfalls. Now let's talk about what actually works. Building a bulletproof system, rules, tools, and mindset shields that protect your money when everything else is pulling at it. This isn't fancy theory, it's what the people who keep sudden wealth do differently. First rule, hit pause. When the money lands, give yourself a mandatory cooling off period, 90 days minimum, 6 months if you can. No big purchases, no loans, no investments. Just park it in a high-yield savings or safe account and breathe. This buys time for the dopamine rush to fade and for you to think straight. Second, get professional help, the right kind. Hire a fee-only fiduciary financial advisor, not someone selling products. A tax pro who knows windfall taxes, lump sum hits hard with federal and state bites. Maybe a therapist familiar with sudden wealth syndrome to handle the emotional side. Third, build simple buckets. Divide the money early. Common setup that's worked for winners. Emergency fund. 6 to 12 months living expenses, liquid and safe. Lifestyle fund. A set amount for fun spending, say 10-20% max. Investment bucket, the bulk, going into low-cost index funds. Diversified. Giving bucket, planned charity or family help, fixed amount, not open-ended. Use the 50-30-20 rule as a starting guardrail if it fits. 50% needs, 30% wants, 20% savings investments. But adjust for your reality. Tools that make it stick. Apps like NAB, you need a budget, or Mint for tracking every dollar. Automate transfers so money moves before you can touch it. Real example, a Powerball winner from a few years back who stayed anonymous did exactly this. Took the lump sum, hired a team, paused all spending, set up trusts and buckets. Years later, still wealthy, low-profile life, no drama. Contrast that with the disasters we talked about. They skipped the system and let emotions drive. Or take Keanu Reeves, not a windfall guy, but earned big and kept it simple. Modest living, smart giving through private foundations, no flashy creep. Mindset shield number 1. Remember, money is a tool, not your identity. Number 2, practice saying no like it's a muscle. Number 3, focus on freedom over stuff. Here's the small lesson to grab today. A system isn't sexy, but it's what turns luck into lasting wealth. Build it before you need it or right when the money hits. No system? You're relying on willpower against a tsunami, but having the system is step 1. Next, we're going deeper. How to actually turn that windfall into generational wealth, real strategies, real moves that compound over decades. These are the plays that separate one-time winners from family legacies. You're gonna want this. Let's keep rolling. All right, now that you've got the system in place, the pause, the buckets, the pros helping you, let's talk about the end game. Turning a windfall into generational wealth. Not just keeping the money for yourself, but making it grow and protecting your family for decades. This is where average winners stop, and the smart ones build legacies. The core idea is simple. Stop thinking of the windfall as spendable cash and start treating it like seed capital for a family business that runs on autopilot. Real strategies that actually work. First, pay off high-interest debt immediately. Credit cards, payday loans, anything over 7 to 8% interest. It's the highest guaranteed return you can get. Then, build that emergency fund we mentioned, 6 to 12 months, but make it generational by putting part in a high-yield account your kids can inherit. Second, invest the bulk conservatively for the long haul. Low-cost index funds tracking the S&P 500. The historical average is around 10% annual return over decades. Put it in a brokerage account or Roth IRA if eligible. The power? Compounding. A $5 million lump sum at 8% compounded grows to over $50 million in 30 years without adding a dime. Third, use trusts and estate planning. Set up revocable living trusts or irrevocable ones to shield from lawsuits and minimize estate taxes. Name beneficiaries clearly. This keeps the money in the family bloodline if that's your goal. Fourth, diversify smartly. Some in real estate, rental properties for cash flow. Some in bonds for stability. Maybe a small slice in alternatives if you're sophisticated. but nothing speculative. Avoid hot tips or crypto moonshots. Fifth, teach the next generation early. Don't hide the money. Educate kids on basics, budgeting, and investing through allowance systems or junior accounts. Real example, the anonymous Powerball winner who took a huge lump sum a few years back. They hired a team, set up trusts, invested mostly in index funds and municipal bonds. Years later, still multi-millionaires, funding college for grandkids, no public drama. Or look at Chris Gardner, the real guy behind The Pursuit of Happiness. Starting from homelessness, built a brokerage firm slowly, but when his big break came, he invested wisely, set up foundations, and now his kids are set without the entitlement trap. Contrast that with the blow-it-all stories. They spent or gave it away. These folks compounded it. Here's the small lesson to lock in. Generational wealth isn't about how much you start with. It's about how patiently and systematically you grow it. One disciplined windfall, invested boringly, can change a family tree forever. But doing all this right comes down to one final truth. Next, we're wrapping up with the reality check. Why keeping money always starts with keeping control of yourself first. This is the part that ties it all together. Don't miss it. We're almost home. All right, let's wrap this up with the final reality check. The one thing that ties everything together. Keeping money doesn't start with fancy investments, trusts, or even the perfect buckets. It starts and ends with keeping control of yourself first. All the stories we've covered, the traps, the systems, they all boil down to this. Money amplifies who you are. If you're disciplined, patient, and clear on your values, it'll build you up. If you're impulsive, people-pleasing, or chasing validation, it'll tear you down faster than you can imagine. The lottery winners who vanished, the athletes who earned empires and lost them, they didn't lack intelligence. They lost control of emotions, boundaries, and habits. On the flip side, the ones who make it last, like the anonymous winners who pause, plan, and stay low-key, or folks like Warren Buffett who live simply amid billions. They mastered self-control long before the money showed up. Or take Keanu Reeves again. Hundreds of millions from movies. But he gives quietly, lives modestly, and rides the subway. No creep, no drama. He's in control of his ego, his spending, his life. The ultimate lesson here is straightforward and tough. No amount of money fixes a lack of self-mastery. Build it now through small habits. Saying no when it hurts, and delaying gratification. Because when the big shot comes, that's what decides if it's a launch pad or a cliff. You've got the tools now, the traps to avoid, the systems to build. If a windfall ever hits you, or even if you're just grinding toward financial freedom, remember, control yourself first, and the money will follow your lead. That's it for today. If this hit hard and you know someone chasing that big break or already living it, share this episode with them. Seriously, hit share right now. It could change their trajectory. And if you're getting real value from these straight talks on money, mindset, and the truths nobody sugarcoats, smash that like button. Drop a comment below. What's the one trap that scares you most, or the rule you're committing to today? I read them all. Right after this, go check out the next video popping up. Capital accumulation. Explained, how wealth really compounds over time and why most people miss it. It's the perfect follow-up, dives deep into how the smart ones turn one-time money into growing empires. You won't want to skip it, and if you haven't yet, subscribe and turn on notifications. We've got more uncomfortable truths coming about building real wealth avoiding the pitfalls and living on your terms. You don't want to miss the next one. Thanks for sticking with me. Stay in control. See you in the next episode.